Welcome, everyone. I'm joined here today by Jodi Wright, the author of Eat and Get Gas, which is a fantastic title. When I first heard it, I didn't know what I was going to be reading, and it's not what I thought it was at all. So, Jodi, thank you so much for being here. Could you explain to me a little bit the inspiration behind this story? Because I just want to know if it's drawn from real life experiences, because your characters are so real, they have so many flaws. So can you explain the inspiration behind it a little bit?
Sure, I will. And thanks for having me. And well, Eat and Get Gas has been in my head for about, 30, 40 years. It's what my dad called every roadside restaurant and gas station that we ever drove by, because I'm from the state that Eat and Get Gas is set in. The story is set in the same state I grew up in. But I've lived in New Zealand most of my life. I've lived in New Zealand, but I just remember how funny it was. My sisters and I, we'd laugh and laugh and laugh because, of course, we thought he was talking about, eat and fart. We didn't really get that there was a gas station and a cafe. And so it always stuck with me. And I thought, one day I'm going to write this short story about my experiences with roadside cafes. And then when I started to write this story, I'd been writing for about a few months, and it wasn't going very well. And then I started to think about, a girl living in a restaurant or having to go to a restaurant she wasn't familiar with, or a cafe. And I wrote for long enough to catch this voice of this girl called Evan. And once I caught her voice, the story just continued. It just went on. And the result is a book that, it was a lot longer when it went to the editor. It wasn't 72,000 words. It was a lot longer, but it was fine. It's the editor sometimes. It just makes the whole story click so well. And my editor is from Christchurch, Anna Rogers. I adore her. And she just, she just made it look so simple. And so I loved it. I appreciated it. It was the best choice. And that's kind of how the whole thing evolved. But it was years in the making, years and years, and many, many drafts. My husband listened to so many stories. Whether he wanted to hear, how about this chapter 7? How's this go?
You need someone to run it by. So yeah, of course, it makes sense.
I think he was asleep, but it didn't matter. Yeah, so I like it too. And I often don't, when I finish writing a short story or something, I'll just stick it away in some folder, some Dropbox folder, because I'm not really sure. I don't really like it, but I still like this. 3 months later, I still like this story. So I don't know what that means, but I'm glad I still like it. I don't want to hide it under my bed, not mention it to anybody.
No, I think that's a difficult thing with a lot of authors, is that, and a lot of people who do creative things in general, is like you see your work and you're always a little bit like, oh, I don't know how I feel, but it's really cool that you do enjoy this a lot still. And I think for good reason. I mean, the writing in your book it just keeps you captivated from the beginning to the end. I haven't gotten to the end yet, but I will, because I'm just really excited to keep reading it. The writing, is so natural. The characters, like, they have their own distinct voices, and it just feels really real. And I think that's really hard to do with a lot of characters. So kudos to you for that, honestly.
I grew up with this kind of people. This was my family and extended family, and pieces of all of them. The quirkiness, I always thought they were, the weirdos, the people, the men in my family who had a cigarette in their mouth, smoking it, and then they'd light the next cigarette off of that cigarette, and they always had one hanging out of their mouth. And as an 8 and 9-year-old, I was quite intrigued by that. So I decided I'd smoke too. But these were the kind of people that were around me. And so I know sometimes it felt like I was making fun of them in ways, but maybe I was. but they were very interesting. The weirder they were, the more interesting, and I wanted to be around them.
Definitely. I feel like they must have been a big inspiration for this book too. Like family is a big theme in this book. And so I'm wondering, this family, these people that you have, do they have any commonalities with your own? Like you've obviously pulled bits from the interesting people in your life. Are they?
Well, I am kind of, I'm a bit older than you are. And so I grew up in the United States and I wasn't quite a teenager when the Vietnam War was happening. And then I was maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, when a lot of my friends' brothers were drafted to Vietnam. And I lived in a neighborhood that had a lot of kids, and 4 or 5 of the boys within 7 or 8 blocks of us were drafted as well. And I remember this being such an unsettling thing. And right about that time, my mom remarried, and she married an Army officer in the United States Army, and he was in the infantry, and he had spent several years in Vietnam. So our whole kind of world became this Vietnam War in several ways, and it was scary. And I had a really, really good friend in school that her brother went to Canada rather than, it snuck away one night, and she wasn't ever supposed to talk about it. And then a couple of weeks later, she just disappeared. Her family moved, and I've never seen her again. I always wondered about her, and I always wondered about her brother. So it was kind of common. Washington State, where I'm from, is not very far from the Canadian border. And at that time, I think maybe Canada was, pretty helpful to help kids. And they were just kids, they were just 18-year-old boys. They weren't, grown men who could make a decision. So I think that war had an impact on a lot of us, and the PTSD that was never treated. So that's kind of where I couldn't write that book set in 1971, 72 without that situation, because that's what was a driver for a lot of families breaking up or coming together, or those things that was happening. It was weird. That's what it was.
Yeah, it is a bit odd. Obviously, like I'm in New Zealand, and we haven't really ever had to deal with, I guess, consignment as recently as the US has. And so it is a very odd situation. I think it's really interesting that you decided to write about that. What was the reason that you wanted to write this story? Did you feel like it was something that needed to be told, or is it just because the voice of Evan just kind of started coming to you a bit more and it just felt natural?
I do read a lot, and what I rarely ever find is kind of a contemporary contemporary historical fiction set in that period that has a bit that isn't so dark. I mean, this book is dark, but I wanted to lighten it up with, there is some fun around there. There is some interesting things happening. It's not all doom and gloom. And the struggle of Evan, kind of manifests itself in different ways with her, her relationships with these different, these individuals. And so she does kind of survive, but ultimately the reason that she ends up there is because of the Vietnam War. That's the push, and that her mother was not well enough and to take care of her. And that was it. And that was true for many people, that there's a displacement that happened within their family during that war, probably during all wars, but that was the only one I was aware of as a kid.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's pretty heavy, but I do love that you put it into a story that anyone can pick up and connect with. So just a big well done for that, honestly.
And so was D.B. Cooper. D.B. Cooper was a real person, this hijacker. He was a real person, and that it really happened, and just that way. And he's never been found. No one's ever, there's this big mystery. And there were so many people that I knew that were obsessed with trying to find D.B. Cooper. And they would go out on weekends looking for his parachute, it was just, still to this day, I watched a documentary last year about D.B. Cooper, and there are still people who are still looking for him.
Oh my gosh, incredible.
I know, it's incredible. Yeah.
Needs its own story.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think writing is kind of it's challenging in a lot of ways, but the best thing about it is I'm always surprised. Like I didn't know about the end. I didn't know how the ending was going to go until one day I sat down and it just came out. That was it. That was how it was going to end, and I felt fine about it. I'm like, oh, because I have been in lots of writers groups where people know the ending before they even start writing. They know exactly where they're going. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I'm always like fascinated by that. I never know how authors go about this. Like you don't know the ending for your book, but other people do. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how do you connect the dots?
I know. I don't know how they do it. I don't know. I've tried to write an outline, tried to, okay, I'm going to do this formula. I'm going to follow what they did. And it just never works. So I don't know. I just think there's a million ways to write. Everybody has their own thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's really important to remember too. I did want to ask, you said that you struggled with some things in your writing. What did you struggle with? What were the parts of that you struggled with?
Well, not making it too gloomy. The parts that came out were kind of gloomy, where I didn't need to tell you that Evan is kind of overwhelmed and depressed and feels the burden of the weight of her family's dysfunction a lot. I didn't need to tell you that, but in a lot of the pages and words that were taken out before it was published, I did. So those kind of things I have to be aware of, and I don't need to tell you twice. I'm just reading the book now, and I think the author has told me like 4 or 5 times the same thing. Quit reminding me. I know, right? So that's the kind of stuff I have to really be careful about.
Yeah, I guess your editor would have helped you with that too a little bit.
Oh yeah, in the kindest way. Kill your darlings. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. I don't know that I liked him that much anyway. Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of that, what was your favorite part of the writing process?
I love the process of just getting involved in the structure of how this goes, and then reading it back to myself and thinking, is that right? Is that how I want you to? That's how I want you to engage with Evan. Is that what I want you to think? Or I love that whole of developing this character. Who the most interesting characters for me to develop there were Hal and Herbert. I love Hal and Herbert. I love these 2 guys who play the piano, who live together, who are kind of reclusive but smart. And because I knew people, that there were people like this. There were a lot of immigrants in the neighborhood that I grew up in my hometown from World War II. There were a lot of Europeans. They all had really interesting musical skills. Our neighbor played the cello, like he was once in an orchestra. I mean, these kind of things. This woman behind us was German, and she made chocolates. She made, she had this big marble table, and she molded chocolates. There were so many interesting things about, I don't know, my childhood, that neighborhood, that I could just pull things constantly from them. But I liked Hal and Herbert. I liked that they added some lightness to that whole, to the cafe and gas station.
Oh, nice. I love that. I love when characters, you feel so close to them, and you just really love how they've turned out. And you do need, I guess, characters that give a little bit of something different to the book as well, just adding a little bit of uniqueness or something of the like. That's really cool.
I did,
Oh, continue.
Right. Oh no, I also didn't want it to look like all the men in the book were mean or bad, or they were Yeah. There was a reflection of the time that they were in. Even her father, who was changed by the war. Well, why wouldn't he be? How could you go to a battle every day and then not feel detached from the rest of the world and defensive? And you couldn't. It wouldn't be possible. So I didn't really want everybody to be or deeply disturbed.
Yeah. No,
Somewhat disturbed is okay. Somewhat disturbed.
Yeah. Still part of life. Do you have any plans to make more books, like in a series, like or maybe even related to the characters that you have in here, or something completely different? Do you have any?
No,
ideas?
I don't. I don't have any plans to continue on with that story. I wrote a book and published about 7 years ago, another book called How to Grow an Addict. And it's been good and it sells well. And people ask me that too. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think it's done. I just feel like whatever's going to happen in the future with those characters should be in the reader's mind. Now it's yours. Now it's your choice. Whatever you want to happen, how Evan lives out her life is fine with me. However, hopefully she's happy, joyous, and free. That's what I would love.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good actually. I do love it when you get to make up your mind about things, and they're not fully set in stone. Sometimes I think books can take your beloved characters, in a direction you didn't want them to go. So, yeah, it's really good to just leave it to the reader. Everyone has their own opinion. So
yes, yes, all reviews will tell you that too. Right. I think I got a 1-star review the other day, and then the guy wrote me a note and he said, "It's just because your title is so rude." And I just, you just didn't get it. You just didn't get it.
Oh gosh, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, I guess, but that's
rough. No, I thought, okay, all right. I said, "You're not my uncle, are you? You're not related to me."
Oh my gosh. Oh, amazing. Out of curiosity, like you obviously have this really unique writing style. What books are you reading at the moment? Do you kind of get your inspiration or your writing kind of?
I'm just finishing Geraldine Brooks' The Horse, which is excellent, which I love that book.
Okay.
Oh, listen, there's so many. There's just so many. I just, because my sister asked me yesterday, she said, what are you looking for? And I said, well, I'm starting this book called Looking for Jane. And I like the story. I like the story. And it's a contemporary fiction kind of. What's the other one I was reading? Oh, The Great Believers. I started it and I'm not really sure. And I just finished Alice Hoffman's The Invisible Hour. And that was good. That was good.
Oh my gosh. So busy with all these books. I don't know.
I know. I don't go to a bookstore. I can't go into a bookstore.
You come out with the entire store.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I live in Christchurch, and I had hundreds and hundreds of books before the earthquake. And then the earthquake happened and our hot water tank spilled all down the stairs and all over my bookcase. So by the time we got back in the house, they'd all molded. And so I thought, I'm going to learn to read off of a Kindle. But I do have, I still buy books, but I pretend I'm not buying them.
I think it's so hard to get away from physical books. I understand like Kindle and all those other things are super like convenient, but just the feel of a book in your hands.
I do like that feel. I like it. I like the feel of like, okay. I traveled back to Seattle to see my mom for a couple of weeks, and my husband said, why do you have 3 books in your bag, in your purse? And I'm like, just cause. I have no other reason. It's just cause.
It feels good with it. Yeah, I understand it.
Just cause.
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jodi. It's been fascinating talking to you. I love hearing about this book and these characters. And I was a bit nervous because I haven't completely finished the book yet. So I was like, oh gosh, I hope there's no kind of like spoilers or anything. But I'm just so keen to keep reading it, honestly. And I think everyone can get something from this. And yeah, just thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me.
Thanks for having me, and send me an email or something and tell me when you get to the end. I'd be interested to hear what you think.
I will, and I will tell you exactly where I think Evan will go in her life.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.